We start at 3 p.m. Eastern, the NFC Championship game. It's exactly what we expected for the last 8 weeks. The San Francisco, I guess 8 weeks is a little much. The first couple weeks with Purdy, I guess we didn't think we'd get here. So maybe the last 5 weeks. Why don't we say that? San Francisco 49ers, 15-4, 5-3 on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now 15-3, 8-2 at home. We're at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have big weather difference in these two games. It's pretty nice in Philly. 50 Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, 10 miles per hour. Very cold in KC, but we're here breaking down the Eagles spot. So let's get to work here. We will start with the line history in this one. At Pinnacle, this opened up with the Eagles -2 at -114. They're -2.5 at -110. From a totals situation, this opened up at 45.5 and is now at 46. My first thought was to bet the under, but of course it was because I went 4-0 on unders last week, and I'm sure that's wreaking havoc in my mind. And I thought, we'll wait and we'll talk it out. And this has already gone up a half point since I waited. But I wanted the under 45.5. Now it's at 46. We're going to discuss that more as we go. For cash flow, Philadelphia Eagles have been given implied line value from Sports Insights. So is the Bengals. But we're here. 33,832 tickets in. That's the most tickets we've been able to talk about on the Gridiron Gambler Show. 68% of the tickets on the Eagles and 91% of the cash. 55% of the tickets and 56% of the cash is on the over. Speaking of that over, Sammy Comer says that over is sharp here. Everyone on the under, and it's gone up. I mean, still we have 55% of the tickets on the over. But clearly, people who cashed on the under all last week are probably going to go back to the well. So I completely get the thought process there. And Papa Carl's bought out of his under 45.5. Very, very interesting. Okay, so the 49ers come in off their 12th straight win, an underwhelming 19-12 victory at home over the Cowboys. They've covered the spread in 9 of their last 10. The biggest story out of the 49er camp is defensive lineman Charles Omenihu, who has been arrested after a domestic violence allegation. It's pretty ugly. The pictures are out, and it's pretty ugly stuff. He had a career-high 4.5 sacks in the regular season. He added 2 sacks and a forced fumble in the wildcard win over Seattle. He only played 15 defensive snaps Sunday. He injured his oblique during the game, but he was able to return. And it will be a loss to the Niners lineup. The offense struggled, which is what I expected them to do against the best defense that Purdy has faced. They finished with just 312 total yards. They were 1 of 3 in the red zone. They haven't been very good in the red zone with Purdy at quarterback. Purdy was 19 of 29 for 214 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He's now 7-0 as a starter. He joined Joe Flacco and Mark Sanchez as the only rookie quarterbacks to win 2 playoff starts. Kittle caught 5 for 95, Debo 4 for 45, and ran 4 times for 11 yards. Elijah Mitchell had 14 carries for 51 yards. McCaffrey ran 10 times for 35 yards and a touchdown. He caught 6 passes for 22 yards. The defense didn't look good against the Cowboys, and it would be fair to say that this is an even better defense that they are facing on Sunday. The 49ers defense, though, was excellent. They held the Cowboys to just 282 total yards. The Cowboys were 5 of 15 on third down, 1 of 3 in the red zone. They didn't get a ton of pressure on Dak. They sacked him once, hit him 4 times, but they got all the pressure that they needed. They got interceptions from Warner and Diomodor Lenore. The Niners are 9-3 versus top 10 offenses since the 2021 season. They're undefeated versus bottom 10 run offenses since the 2021 season. They've allowed touchdowns on 26%, or scores, I should say, on 26% of opening drives this season. That's the best in the NFL. The 49ers defense has allowed 16.4 points per game this season. And the Eagles are going to be a very tough nut to crack. Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson certainly did not look any worse for wear with the adductor injury. It was hard to tell that he was hurt at all. So Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead are going to have their hands full. The 49ers pass rush, 46% pass rush win rate, 5th in the NFL. 79.9 pro football focused pass rush grade is also 5th. 11.6% quarterback knockdown rate is 6th. Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, 89.9% pass blocking efficiency. That is 2nd in the league. They've allowed 11 sacks. That's 1st in the league. 9 quarterback hits. That's tied for 1st in the league. and 120 pressures allowed. That's fourth. And you need to put pressure on Hurts. It's imperative. He's 20th in his passer rating and 28th in his completion rating when pressured this season. The Eagles coming off a dominant 38-7 victory at home over the Giants. They were up 28-0 at the half. They have only been 4 more lopsided first half playoff shutouts in NFL history. The defense looked very strong. They were 10-14 on third down, 4-5 in the red zone. Jalen Hurts was 16-24 for 154 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran 9 times for 34 yards and a touchdown. He went 7 of 7 for 89 yards in the first quarter. He looked poised. He looked excellent. Devonta Smith caught 6 for 61 in a touchdown. Dallas Goedert caught 5 for 58 in a touchdown. A.J. Brown was held to 3 catches for 22 yards, but we know he's a big play receiver. They ran 44 times for 268 yards. Kenneth Gainwell ran 12 for 112 in a touchdown, and Miles Sanders ran 17 times for 90. They will find things much more difficult running on the 49ers, but they can have success through the air, and they're going to need to. The 49ers averaged 185.9 receiving yards per game allowed to wide receivers in the last 8 weeks of the regular season. That was 4th worst in the NFL. Over that time, Eagles receivers had 210.4 yards per game. That was 2nd best in the NFL. The Eagles ranked 1st in the league in yards per pass attempt at 8.1. They should be able to exploit the weakness, the only weakness of the 49ers defense, which is their secondary. The Eagles defense was excellent. They held the Giants to just 227 total yards. They swarmed Danny time, sacking him 5 times, hit him 8 times. Bradbury had an interception. But the Eagles were winless versus top 10 offenses last season, tied for worst in the NFL. No, a lot's changed this year. The Eagles' defense has sacked opponent quarterbacks on 11% of pass attempts. That's the best in the NFL. The Eagles' defense has sacked opponents 70 times this season, the most in the NFL. They lead the NFL in opponent yards per play at 4.8, opponent yards per pass attempt at 5.4, and sack percentage at 11.4. The Eagles are the complete package. They had the 8th best scoring defense, 2nd best yards allowed, 3rd scoring offense. They aren't very strong against the run. That's their vulnerability. They allowed 4.6 yards per carry. That's 26th in the league. In their last 16 home playoff games, the under's hit in 12 of them. For the Niners, they've had 7 straight road games go under the total. This is by far the toughest matchup that we've seen Purdy have. And I'm surprised it's just 2.5. I think this should be at a 3. I do not expect my 49ers to beat the Eagles in Philadelphia. They're capable of it, but this is a tough hill to climb. Take it away, Andy. I can't wait to hear your thoughts, your breakdowns, how we're going to get paid. We'll go over the chat and what they think. But the floor is yours, Niners, Eagles.
I don't want you to think that you're just leaning on these unders because you've had recent success with unders. I think as this ticks up, that might be a hot side eventually once we get close. If this gets bet up, I think you might see some buyback. And you're definitely, obviously, have seen some money come in on the other game. Obviously, a completely different situation. It's tough to bet this under right now where it's at, just because what we saw with the Eagles, even when they were trying to tone it down, and it'll be a different kind of attack. Obviously, we saw go look at you mentioned Brown, look at Hurts passing yards, passing numbers, just everything because they didn't need it. Against the Giants, I mean, it was always the matchup we were looking for. I played some Sanders over rushing yards in that one. He got there at halftime. I mean, and it's funny too. I'm glad I didn't do a ladder with him because eventually they just started giving it to backups after the game got out of hand. Kenneth Gainwell was your leading rusher last weekend. The Eagles just got whatever they wanted on the ground, and that was always the breakdown with what they could do against the Giants defense. And I mean, getting behind like that right off the bat against a really good team who was well rested, who apparently the quarterback turned out to be just fine, coming off some injuries and late in the season. I mean, the Giants were just dead in the water. It's so simple to say don't get down big early, but there are teams who can deal a lot better with that sort of situation. You think of some of those comebacks in the playoffs by Mahomes, or teams with offenses that can just kick it into gear and score quickly because they had huge dynamic weapons. I mean, who's the Giants' best wide receiver? It's tough to do it without the Giants' best receiver, no matter who you think it is not 2020 Tyreek Hill. You're just not set up to come back. So that game got ugly and boring, and actually it got a little sketchy A garbage touchdown would have put it over the total for me. I would have been mildly annoyed at that result. Obviously, it would have hurt my weekend a little. So I loved how the Eagles looked. They looked smart. They knew exactly what they needed to do to beat that team. And as you've mentioned, and the chat's mentioned it a couple times, it's a different kind of matchup here. This is a much tougher front four, front seven, but with a very beatable secondary. And there's a decent case to be made. And, every matchup is going to change how a receiving duo does, but week to week, like it's for sure a top 3 receiving duo. The way I've seen, Brown and Smith play at times when they need to be, and they could have a big game here. I think Hurts has a decent game too, as far as not so much designed runs, but I think we see some scrambling here. You can be susceptible to that if you can draw some of that. If we end up with some zone coverage and draw them into deep quarters, and suddenly there's big areas of green for Hurts to run into. And I do lean Eagles. Drew kind of talked me into this one. I've loved the Niners. I've played the Niners quite a bit, but it hasn't exactly been a who's who for Purdy. They have so many offensive skill position players, but it's just tough. It's just a really tough defense they're finally going to go up against. It's a really tough offensive line that this pass rush is going to go up against. You mentioned the arrest. Not really a frontline starter, but it's definitely he's a depth piece that cycles in, and so that will hurt a little with if you're looking to cycle in some rushers late in a game where you need to be stopping a team. So yeah, it's I think honestly it'll be kind of shoes on the other foot in this one. Philly will get run on a little. Mm-hmm. So I do think the Niners will have some success on the ground. And as much as I've loved Purdy and the fact that he's apparently a witch who has magic powers and can just throw 3 interceptable passes in every half of football and nobody ever catches him, that is going to catch up to him sometimes. He played essentially the same game as Dak Prescott, except worse. The only thing that all his interceptions got dropped. Like essentially he had the Dak Prescott game. He threw a bunch of decent passes to some receivers who were open. He got bailed out by Kittle on a nice catch there. And it was also a spot where he threw 3-4 pretty bad passes, and we had some dropped interceptions that probably could have swung that game. So yeah, Skydragon knows the Purdy luck box interception stuff has been ongoing. This is a decent secondary here. So, Eagles -2.5. I ended up, even right now, I found a cheap price at BetOnline on this.
Eagles -2.5. I get it. I mean, everyone knows I have futures on the Niners to win the conference and to win the Super Bowl. And, I would I have futures on the Bengals, as you guys all know. I'm in a pretty good situation. I certainly wouldn't. I have no need to bet the 49ers. I have a huge payday awaiting if they can win. And I have a
you have them to win the conference?
Yeah, 750 plus 750.
Are you thinking about just a couple of units on just Eagles money line, or?
No, I'm thinking of taking apart betting the Eagles Chiefs money line parlay, because I really only need one of these teams to win, and I'm in line for a big payday. And a similar payday, even though I doubled up the bet on the Bengals, it's almost exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm thinking of doing. I'm not thinking of, because I just need one to go. But I'm quite confident in the Bengals at this point, whereas I think this is an extremely difficult test for the 49ers. So Skydragon says, first time on the road, Purdy put up 21 at terrible Seattle. Now he's calling them terrible Seattle. That wasn't what he was calling them a little while ago. First time against a good defense, just 19 versus Dallas. He says this will be the first time Purdy faces a good defense and is on the road at the same time. Not the first time he faces a good defense, but this is the first time he faces both at the same time. And I think that I'm in complete agreement. Now, if the 49ers can get a lead, I think everything changes. I really do. We do not want to see the 49ers behind the 8 ball. You've talked about the luck box of Purdy. Would it surprise me if Shanahan was able to conjure up the first 15 plays of magic run the ball down the Eagles' throat and get a 7-0 lead. It wouldn't. And if that happens, then the game script, moves pretty sharply towards the Niners. If the Eagles take the lead, I think the Niners are in trouble. So are we in agreement, statistically led agreement, that the 49ers should be able to run on the Eagles and the Eagles should be able to throw on the 49ers?
Exactly. And I mean, a bit of a power number play too here, just where I'm at, and then also the matchup. And again, a little bump to this that maybe I wouldn't have had if I didn't watch the game last Sunday was a very, very conservative Shanahan. Like, I don't know what happens to. Do you remember Purdy's first game? Where everyone's like, all right, this kid, we don't know anything. Like, they're probably just going to lean on the running backs. And Purdy's out there slinging it into, deep post routes on like second down. And they're being crazy aggressive. There's something strange that happens in Shanahan in the playoffs. I can't explain it, but suddenly this team starts to be a little more conservative in spots where they shouldn't be. It was maddening to watch last week, obviously. Hopefully it's to my benefit here as they maybe punt on some fourth downs they shouldn't and take some field goals they shouldn't. So if that rears its ugly head, if we see the conservativeness that we saw last week from the Niners on some of the decision making, I don't think they have a chance. You can't do that against a team that's going to get big chunk yardage on you through the air.
The very best thing for Niners backers, though, is that the Eagles looked so good against the Giants, who we talked about being fraudulent when they were going to play Minnesota. And the Niners did not look very good against the Cowboys. I mean, that helps. Look what it did for the betting market when the Bengals looked bad against the Ravens. And the Bills became huge favorites. And they didn't look good against the Dolphins, but they didn't look as bad as the Bengals looked. So O+ says, my concern with the Niners not scoring enough points. Well, the Niners score enough points. Birdie says it sets up so well for the 49ers play offense. He says between the two teams from an SOS standpoint, there's a massive step up for the Eagles. Niners seem to me to be the play. It's nice to hear that, but it's very difficult to take the biases away from, because we watch all these games.
Yeah.
The Eagles look spectacular, and I know that isn't a fair example of what the future holds, and we know that from the Bengals, and we're going to talk about that in the next game. Harold Williams says, I just think Purdy will be overwhelmed. He won't be overwhelmed if they can get a lead.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet. I don't think he'll be overwhelmed. I think just some of his mistakes will finally start to cost them, and keeping up with this pass offense. What we're going to see against the secondary with a really good duo of wide receivers is kind of the reasons I'd be on here. And truthfully, as much as I love Shanahan right now, I like the way, I love the game plan Sirianni put together. And they were a much better team than the Giants. That was clear immediately. So putting a game plan together is easy for a bad team. Not a bad team, but a middling team like that. But if he can put together a near perfect game plan again, Eagles probably get near 30 in this, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on Purdy against a tougher defense.
Did it surprise you when I talked about Hurts' 20th passer rating and 28th completion rating when pressured this season? Did it not surprise you because he's rarely being pressured? But did those numbers?
I think the context there is a lot of times he's not pressured a ton, and a lot of those throws when he's pressured are just some of them are just throwaways, and also some of the times when he's pressured, there's just not a throw because a lot of times you see a pressure and he's turning it into a running play.
All right, that's
so that, which I know that doesn't affect the passing numbers, but it lessens the sample size.
So I understand your Eagles -2.5, -108. It sounds actually, I don't want to put talk to me about the total here. I don't want to put words in my mouth from listening to actually, but I felt like you've gotten off of the under and move to the over if that was a free $500 bet. Bookmaker and Bet Chris have now juiced the over at 46. This is up from 45.5 or 45 opener. They're the first books that I see to juice the over at this number, which implies that 46.5 and possibly 47 are coming. If you had a free $500 bet right now, what would it be on the total?
Probably still the under. I don't like this one enough to play. It's getting close to probably where it should be, and I think there's a wide distribution of of results where you see the Eagles do something like they did last week, where Sirianni finds what works for the offense and they just keep doing it, and it's like, oh man, this game's going to go over because the Eagles have, they punted once in the first half, and it's 24-10, 24-13 in the first half, and how the hell is that staying under at that point? So it might get bet up, and Sky Dragon, I agree. If this keeps getting bet up, you'll see some resistance again. I think there's going to be a little bit of ping-ponging, and we're very close to where this number should be. I'm probably staying off it and just sticking with the Eagles.
I plan to move on the under. That is my plan at this point. I think this is going to be a battle in the trenches. I think this is going to be a real hard-fought football game. I think this will be similar to the Cowboys game. It's just not going to be so easy for the 49ers, because even when it was tied 9-9, I was like, come on. We're going to find some comfort here because the Cowboys just aren't good. The Eagles are good. Andy has moved on the Eagles -2.5, and I will be parlaying the Eagles money line and the Chiefs money line. It's just too easy of a hedge to take away some of the pain that I could feel if neither of my teams make it to the Super Bowl. The question is, how much will I bet on that? And that's what I'm still kind of figuring out. And I probably should have done it. And we'll talk about it in the next game, but when it got up to 2.5 on each side, there was a +120 on the Chiefs that gone down to +105. But we will discuss that here in our next game.
Last thought too, and the last time the Eagles played a road game was Santa had not come yet. It's been a while. They've had the benefit of not having to travel for a while. It makes rehab easier. It makes rest. It makes just rejuvenation, everything. So it is, San Francisco finally has to travel.
Yeah, and it's a big travel, and it's a tough place to play. That is the NFC Championship game, 49ers, Eagles. Our man Andy on Eagles -2.5 at -108. And I have the luxury of capping this game with you guys all week, which I will be doing. And I'm going to move on the under at some point, and then I'll be live betting it nonstop as we hammer both of these live games.